So here's a closer look at how the first phase could proceed. The Israeli cabinet is expected to vote on the deal in the next hour. If approved, a ceasefire would take effect immediately, with Israeli troops having then 24 hours to withdraw to an agreed line. At the same time, Israel would allow hundreds of aid trucks into Gaza, desperately needed supplies. Hamas, the Palestinian militant group that governs Gaza, would then have 72 hours to release the remaining living hostages. That would be by Monday at the latest. Returning the remains of dead hostages may take longer, as Hamas says it does not know where all of the victims are. We can speak now to Gerhard Conrad. He's a former senior German intelligence official and one of Europe's most experienced negotiators, known for mediating prisoner exchanges between Israel and Hezbollah. Welcome to DW. Thank you so much for your time today. As we've been saying, you've been involved in some of the most complex mediation efforts in the region. Can I ask you, what's your take on how this deal has evolved?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And indeed, my experience is, of course, much more limited in scope, at least, although very many details of the current deal resemble the deal we had with Gilad Shalit and the implementation of his release in 2011. Now, and if I look back to similar procedures as well earlier in the 2000s, now the playbook is already established. So normally, since all sides start now to implement the playbook, that means what had been described by the colleagues here from Tel Aviv, and is that you really start now with practical preparations which can be observed and controlled. So, for example, the IDF, already the Israeli Defense Forces, have already started preparations for returning to the so-called yellow line, which had been agreed upon. Yeah, there's a map. So the moves from the IDF back to this yellow line will very likely happen. And we have already information that Hamas on its side starts to concentrate some of the hostages in so-called safe places, so in preparation of their handing over then in due time to the ICRC, to the Red Cross. So, you know, from all sides, there is now a kind of dynamism. There might be some hiccups in cabinet decision-making this afternoon, but unlikely. There might be some hiccups in the procedure, the legal procedure for releasing the 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. But again, these, to all likelihood, will be hiccups, not the pretext, not a reason to really disrupt the evolving process. There will be a dynamics. It is pretty unlikely that it's going to be stopped by any side.
And so the mechanics of this deal, as you've been describing this step-by-step approach, do you think this is the smartest way to implement such a complex agreement?
Well, it's a time-honored exercise. You know, it's not the first time that the sides are engaging in such kind of release. It's a kind of ballet. Yeah, it's just with a, let's say, a scripted a sequence of actions and reactions. So pretty complex, but not unheard of. It has been done quite several times in the last 15 to 20 years. So there is no reason to suspect that it would fail due to its complexity or the unwillingness or inability of the sides concerned.
Mm-hmm. Hamas has reportedly demanded guarantees that the war will end once and for all. From your experience, can such guarantees ever be credible in practice?
Well, once and forever, nothing is guaranteed. Yeah? So what is of course guaranteed by the United States, by Qatar, by Egypt, by Turkey, we should not forget Turkey, is really that a so-called peaceful transition from phase one, now this exchange of hostages and prisoners, that this transition from phase one to a kind of phase two is likely. But since I don't see yet the situation after the exchange, we still have Hamas. We still have Hamas under arms. We still have Hamas as the decisive force on the ground. They are doing now the exchange, so they are very much here. We get information here and there that they are already take their revenge or trying to come back in power in parts of the Gaza Strip where they lost control. So how to deal with this kind of infighting, which is possibly to be expected? There is no alternative force apart from the IDF, apart from the Israeli forces. So this will be a very, very sensitive moment, and I don't know. All of us, I don't know how are the arrangements in the background between Hamas and its part-time supporters. I call them now. That means Qatar and Egypt. And so how this transitional period from Sunday, Monday next week to the days to follow, how this will look like. Will Hamas then concentrate, give up the arms? To whom? Question mark. I don't know. Certainly not to the IDF. So these are steps which we'll have to see in order to understand whether the transition next week, whether this will happen without armed clashes or whatever.
So what do you think would be needed then, is necessary to turn this short-term ceasefire, as complicated as it is, into the beginning of a longer-term political process rather than just another pause before the next escalation?
Well, normally, if there have already been some agreements which now have not yet been revealed, at least to my knowledge, between Hamas and the supporting and controlling powers. Yeah? If there is not any kind of agreement how to organize now the week to come, next week and the 2 weeks to come, for an interim arrangement, that's what will have to be necessary. And if we don't see that, then I'm skeptical that the situation in Gaza between Hamas and its non-supporters will evolve peacefully.
Gerhard Conrad, thank you so much for your time today. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.